I can say I'll give a personal story about it first here at our offices. We do have a family who comes in, and the kids have a series of different issues. There's actually one kid with fetal alcohol syndrome. There's another kid who's on the autism spectrum, and he certainly has that behavioral control, major behavioral control issues. And actually, how the conversation of CBD came up was some of the medications that the child was being put on. He was a walking zombie, right? By the end of the day, he was a walking zombie, also diagnosed with ADHD and a whole host of other things. Very young individual. And his school contacted the family and said, listen, you have to speak to your psychologist. These medications we're really concerned about your kid. He can barely stand up in class now. He's practically on tranquilizers. And I think we talked about this in the ADHD podcast. So the psychologist recommended, hey, I want you to start using some CBD with your child. And they said, oh, we know just the guy to talk to. We can go talk to Dr. Frank. I treat them from a chiropractic standpoint. So they come in, we sit down, and we discuss using the CBD oil for these symptoms that this kid was having, the impulse behavioral control issues, certainly the lack of eye contact. He didn't understand language. He didn't understand that he couldn't say certain words. He would repeat bad curse words over and over again. So I said, listen, let's try and use some CBD and see what we can get accomplished. And sure enough, it's amazing the improvement that they've seen using this therapy, this CBD therapy that we've recommended, that was recommended by the psychologist, on top of the other care that they're getting as well. The child is also involved in many rehab programs, special education programs, things along those lines. But the improvements that we've seen are truly incredible. Now, that's personal experience. Research in autism, and I do want to throw this out there, is still a little bit limited. It's not something that's been completely delved into like some of our other topics, but it's certainly starting to expand when it comes to cannabis and autism. Now, the biggest study, and people will be able to look this up in the write-up that we provide for each of these, was carried out in Israel. They took 188 children, and they started to use CBD therapy with these children. They started to use cannabis therapy. And I'm going to read this. Overall, more than 80% of the parents reported significant or moderate improvement in their child. So from a study standpoint, 80% is a really high number. And many of these improvements related to quality of life issues. My child is no longer having those major impulsive outbursts. Some of those major behavioral issues are now under control. Right? So those quality of life issues, some of those other symptoms, the anxiety was another one that they discussed, seeing being reduced when in this case prescribing, because it was a clinical trial in Israel, when prescribing cannabis therapy to these kids. That's probably the most promising study. At the University of California, researchers looked into CBD for regulating emotion and focus, and they really studied CBD as a neuroprotectant, something that's going to protect the brain. And they had very positive feedback on that, reporting that a lot of their patients were having a much calmer demeanor, a much calmer overall behavioral response after utilizing cannabis therapy. Then in 2013, they found a protein. It was Dr. Thomas, I'm going to mispronounce the last name, Sudouhf of Stanford University. And this individual found a protein that was believed to be linked to the endocannabinoid system. And he said it appears to play a crucial role in autism spectrum disorders. So what everyone's agreeing on is this, that the endocannabinoid system, we know that it has CB1 and CB2 receptors present in the brain. And of course, autism is a developmental disorder that occurs within the brain. And they're saying, hey, listen, there is some connection between the endocannabinoid system and autism, especially when it comes to helping to offset some of the symptoms that accompany autism, the behavioral issues, the eye contact issues, anything along those lines. Dosing. Most people ask about dosing when it comes to younger people. So this is fairly important. Most recommendations, it kind of follows. There's a few different ways. If the child has epilepsy, please just go watch our epilepsy podcast that we did. Okay, you're going to want to follow those dosing recommendations when it comes to that. It seems to be fairly accepted that you would do up to 0.5 milligram per pound of body weight of the child, split into 3 separate doses throughout the day. So let me break that down. If you have a 100-pound child, you're going to divide 100 by 2. That's 50 milligrams. You're going to split that 50 milligrams up to 3 separate doses a day, which is roughly just about 17 milligrams 3 times a day. Now, and they say it's safe up to, I'd have to double check, 5 milligrams. They were doing up to 5 milligrams per pound of body weight, which is a lot. I don't have anyone that uses nearly that much, okay? Now, what I will say is this, even 50 milligrams, in my opinion, would be a lot to start with right off the bat for a 100-pound child. I would go slow, just like we do for any of the conditions. Maybe you start at 17 milligrams a day, splitting that 17 milligrams up 3 times a day and work your way up. It's going to vary on the child. It's going to vary on the host of symptoms that they have. Okay, there's a lot of factors that go into autism. This is not a perfect science, but the general accepted standard is that 0.5 milligram per pound of body weight split up to 3 times a day. So 100-pound child, divide that by 2, that's 50 milligrams. Divide 50 by 3, that's roughly 17 milligrams a day, 3 times throughout the day.